Welcome to Behind Closed Books, the podcast where business owners and experts reveal the financial decisions that shape their success. Each episode brings you unscripted stories of turning points, hard calls, and the numbers that changed everything to pivot, recover, and grow. If you're building a business and ready to think differently about profit, pressure, and progress, behind every smart decision is a story worth telling. This is the show. Here is your host, Craig Sheets.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Behind Closed Books. My next guest today has been dancing since she was 3 years old. I can't believe that. That's a long time dancing. She has an array of performance skills, including aerial, acrobatics, along with all sorts and styles of dance. She's performed and choreographed in the Vancouver area, so she has international experience. From a global perspective, she performed at the closing ceremonies of the Pan American Games. That's really cool. I want to hear more about that. In her continued global accomplishments, she's toured in a dance troupe around China for 3 months for recording artists. That's pretty wild. She recently lived on a cruise ship for 10 years. Wow. Performing and choreographing and directing their shows. So going from dance up to choreography, that must have been a big step. This also gave her a chance to showcase her skills in the aquatic theater. Oh my gosh, I couldn't imagine on a cruise ship all the equilibrium it would take. Currently, she's transitioned into choreography and creative direction role, whereby she runs a dance choreography and creative direction company as a sole owner. She's handled anywhere from solo artists to full-scale production made up of cast and crew from anywhere from 30 to 100 people. In her spare time, she loves photography and photographing action especially. She likes portrait photography, focusing on dancers and theater, and being with her family and husband, Kevin. With that, let me welcome you, our next guest, Sammie Denham. Welcome to Behind Closed Books, Sammie.
Hi, Greg. Thanks for having me.
This is a lot to go through. It's a lot to unpack, and I want to kind of go through some topics at a high level. But wow, there is quite a bit of information there to unpack. I'm excited. I thought a few topics we can talk about today. I guess going from my point of view, one of the things we can talk about is with all the various aspects of theater, it's often overlooked that there's such a large tax implication in what you do for dancing and dancers. So I thought we can talk about that. How difficult travel is on your life. My gosh, all the traveling you've done, it must be brutal, and trying to get like a regime and consistency and way of life. Some of the challenges you must have in teaching choreography of dances and make sure they memorize their different parts. That's got to be a lot. What are some of the difficulties of transitioning from a dancer performer to a choreographer? I have a hard time saying that word, choreography. I got to learn that word better, I guess. And what are the latest trends in your industry, including that of AI and how it affects your industry? So let's start with, I have just so many parts to start with. How about, what are some of the challenges let's go back to the starting from the dancing perspective. What was it that brought you into dancing? I know you've doing it since you're younger, but professionally, what drew you into it from a professional standpoint when you started?
Oh my gosh. Everything. Having started when I was 3 years old and being exposed to all styles of dance, I fell in love with it. And I would say it's around when I was 16, I thought I'd really like to, take a go at doing this professionally. And I'm very lucky that I had parents that supported that. And teachers and mentors, and all made me feel as though that was possible as an avenue, because not everybody gets that growing up. And so, yeah, when I was 18, I grew up on an island off of Vancouver called Sunshine Coast. And then when I was 18, I moved to Vancouver, and I was part of an intensive training program for a year, which then fed into a dance company for 2 years. And then I got signed by an agency, and it just went from there. And so I kind of went in with this mindset of, first of all, I just want to train to be the best dancer that I can be and see where that takes me. And if it happens to lead to work and more work and continue to be successful, then I will pursue this. I did one semester at university, mostly for my mom, who really wanted me to give it a try. And I did okay, but I just found myself every day sitting in those classrooms. I couldn't wait to get to dance rehearsal. And I would rather spend my days in the studio or creating. And so I did that one semester and I was like, you know what? My heart is not in this right now. It's not to say I'd never go back. Um, but it's better to pursue it when your body is young and able to do everything. And so I kind of made that decision right then that I was going to go full force 100% for it and see what happens for however long. And gosh, here I am almost 20 years later, still doing it professionally. So I'm lucky. It worked out. And
Well, I'd say there's a lot. Obviously, and you say the lucky. I know what you mean, but there's obviously skill. But like you said, that your background, a lot of practice went into that, and then just the tip of the iceberg shows up when you get that big break. I imagine that's got to be exciting. Now, I know with actors, they have to have a what do they call it? Like SAG after some kind of card to show that they're a professional actor. Is there something that dancers need to show you're a professional dancer versus like a whatever?
yeah, it depends what part of the industry you're in. With, New York and Broadway, there's Actors Equity, which I am a part of. I am also one of the founding members, if you will, one of the first people to join the Choreographers Guild, which started about 2 years ago, and that is fighting for choreography in TV and film, and representation and acknowledgement. And I'm specifically part of the New York chapter of that, helping that get off the ground in any way that I can, along with some very phenomenal people. So yeah, there are various unions, but there are a lot of people that never join unions and have full careers as well. So it's a little bit different to acting in that way because some of these unions are very new for us, and hopefully they'll continue to play more of a role in the future. But there's people that have been a part of a union for 20 years and people who never have. It just depends what jobs you want, really, within the industry.
Right. I mentioned it's important to know someone's got your back. So if you're part of a bigger organization than yourself, you know that you're going to get representation. People are looking out for you. I imagine. Does that help from that aspect with what you do?
Yeah, it's just a little bit more of a protection. It's a body of people you can turn to if you have questions about contracts or feel that your contract's not being upheld in the right way. Um, it's always a plus. And more of these unions are existing for us. So it is a great thing.
That's great. And then you said you got the big break when you went to Vancouver, and then did you eventually transition directly from there into working? Well, what was your next step after that? After you were in Vancouver?
So from Vancouver, I actually just through friends and networking, which is how most people get their jobs in this industry. If you're lucky, you get it from an audition, but it's really who you know that helps the most. I got a call randomly one day and said, we just had a dancer drop out. We're leaving for a tour in China in 2 weeks. We'd need you to fly down next week to LA, learn the whole show, do, the photos for all the posters, everything. And I didn't have anything lined up. I was, however, injured at the time, and my older self wishes I had healed properly before going on that tour. So I worked through an injury on tour, which I can talk about as well. But yeah, so I went on this 3-month tour around China, backup dancing for a singer. And we went to 30 plus cities. It was exhausting, sometimes flying from the south of China, 6 hours to the north of China, performing, and then hopping right back on a plane and going back to the south of China. So it was a whirlwind. I was, I think, 24 or 25 at the time, and I could handle it, and it was exciting. And it's a chapter in my life that I probably wouldn't repeat in the same way now.
Well, yeah, adrenaline. Right. Yeah, it's an adrenaline thing too.
Yeah, I was so excited to travel. I had mostly just been in the US and Canada and a little bit the UK, and I wanted to see more of the world. So I took that on. I got back, and then a few months later, I got called. My agent called me and said, we have a spot in the closing ceremonies for the Pan American Games in Toronto this summer. You've got to go for 2 months. I also, that same cast, we also did the opening ceremonies of the Para Pan Am Games a couple weeks later. So,
Jeez. Oh my gosh.
yeah, so I was there. Luckily, all my extended family lives in Toronto, and I had places to stay and people, to be with, which was great. And yeah, so I did this gig in Toronto, and it was phenomenal. I worked with Paul Becker and Jeff Dimitriou, and it was the first time working, on these large sound stages in this full scale of what was going to be put into this massive arena. And we performed right before all the artists did their walkout and everything, and which is later, fun fact, I ended up choreographing on and teaching some of those artists in the aquatic shows. So there's a little bit of a full circle moment there. Yeah, we found that out later.
That's cool. Oh my God.
Yeah, and then while I was on that job, my agent called me again and said, I know you finished this on Friday, but 1 week after that, there's a spot in this cruise ship show if you would like to take that for 6 months. And that would be, rehearsals in Miami, join it in Europe, do the Atlantic crossing, and then do the Caribbean. And I have always been more commercial style of dance. I'm 5'3". I'm by no means a showgirl. And so in my mind, I was like, cruise ships, how does that mix with me? Like, how do those two things go together? And she's like, no, it's come a long way. I will send you a video of the show, and trust me, this is right up your alley. It's not what you're thinking. And I was like, okay, because for me, I've never taken a job just for the money or anything like that. It always had to be something I was also passionate about. And so I wasn't going to take a show where I'm just two-stepping and not inspired at all for 6 months. But she sent me this video, and I'm watching it. And within minutes, I'm like, I can't believe this is on a cruise ship. So the venue is called 270. It's 270 degrees of windows as our backdrop, which they bring down screens on top of to project onto. So there is no traditional backstage. You can only enter from stage lifts or from the rig as an aerialist.
Oh my God.
Yeah, so it's very transformative in that way. And then the styles, were street jazz, hip hop, swing, contemporary, like everything, you name it. It was all styles. And then there was these amazing aerialists coming from the ceiling. And in my mind, I was like, oh, cool, I can't wait to work with them. Not thinking I could potentially be cast as that as well.
You might be one of them one day. Yeah. That might be you.
So I took it. I, in Toronto, found a doctor to do my physical within days, because you have to do a very extensive physical for cruise ships to work on them. And within 2 weeks of that, I was in Miami starting rehearsals for that, which was amazing. The studios are amazing for Royal Caribbean. So again, I went from this full scale arena show, and then I walk into the studios for this cruise ship, and it just opened another world. And I met all these amazing people. I worked with Erica Linz, who was one of the original creators of shows for Cirque du Soleil as an aerialist, as a performer. She now choreographs a ton. If you've ever watched Cirque du Soleil Worlds Away, it's a movie you can watch. She is the lead in that. So I was working with these renowned people in what they do. And I ended up being cast as one of those aerialists that came from the ceiling, as well as danced in the show.
You're like, I never thought that'd be me. Yeah.
Yeah, so I very quickly was Vancouver based, and then all of a sudden bounced from gig to gig that took me around the world. Yeah, and then with Royal Caribbean as a performer alone, I was based out of Europe, the Caribbean, and China, going to Japan. So I got to see a lot of the world that way.
That's interesting you say that, because you can see parts of the world and you don't have to pay for it, because you're literally getting paid to perform, and you're also getting paid to work, but you're getting a chance to see the world at the same time. That's so cool.
Yeah, so when I joined rehearsals for my first cruise ship show with Royal Caribbean, I not only got to join the show with amazing dancing in all styles, but I got to work with a world-renowned aerialist, Erica Lins. If you've ever seen Worlds Away by Cirque du Soleil, which is a movie you can watch, she is the main aerialist in that. And she is trained in multiple styles of aerial, and she's phenomenal. And so day one, I walk in the doors, and this is who I get to work with and learn from. And she's also an amazing choreographer for aerialists. And so, fast forward 6 weeks into the process, and I get chosen to be one of these aerialists that enter through from the rig for the show for multiple scenes. And that just spearheaded a whole new side of performing for me that I fell in love with, which I later got to do in the aquatic venue on 3D systems, which is an outdoor venue with open air flying over the audience, heights of 17 meters. So yeah, that really opened a whole new door for me, which I absolutely loved and became a part of my whole performing career with Royal Caribbean. And then later, when I worked as a rehearsal choreographer and director, and then creator as a choreographer and director as well for them as well, I got to work with aerialists. And already having the experience myself just made it that much easier for me to speak the language with them and to be able to create with them and give them movement and understand how they also have to incorporate that into the skills of the aerial apparatus that they're using. So yeah, that was a whole new addition to my world that I'm so grateful for. And, alongside doing these amazing contracts, I got to travel all around the world. My first contract started in Europe and then and the UK, and then it did the 10-day Atlantic crossing, Northern Atlantic, which was one of the rockiest crossings I've ever done, over to the Caribbean. And then I was based out of the
I
Caribbean.
imagine that's really rocky. Yeah.
Yeah, I've now done 7 Atlantic crossings on cruise ships.
I was going to say, you're trying to dance. I always wonder how that works. And the floor is moving and you're moving, and the two either come together quicker or take longer. It must be really weird phenomena to feel that difference when it's rocking back and forth.
It is. We do stay in close contact with the bridge, and there is a certain percentage of listing that we then have to cancel a show and reschedule it. So we are safe. We don't just do it in any kind of weather, but we will do it to a certain degree. And there can be times where you're traveling across the stage and it feels like uphill, and then all of a sudden it feels like downhill, and you gain momentum. Or you can be an airlift in the air, and instead of being static, you're swinging side to side over the audience when you're not supposed to be. So there's definitely challenges. I think one of the most dangerous sides to it, and it is the number one reason in a normal theater that will cancel or in our ice venues, is if it happens to list and you're in the air, but you come down at the same time as the ship is coming down on a wave, that's a lot of added pressure to that landing, and that's when injuries can happen. Yeah. So, and then in a water venue, in the aquatic venue, yeah, if you've got water, listing to one side of the pool as someone dives from 17 meters and they went from having 14 feet to 3 feet of water, that's a big problem. So, there's all different metrics and ways that we decide whether or not we're doing a show in weather like that. But for the most part, it goes well.
I was on a cruise ship once and I was looking across the deck. I was on deck like 17 and looking straight across. And I remember seeing a guy like the same level I'm at, and he yelled something down to somebody down below, and then he just jumped, and I was like, what is actually happening right now? And it was the divers were practicing while they were in port. Oh my gosh, it looks so scary. That looks terrifying. It looked absolutely terrifying to do.
I would not want to do it. The most I've dove from is 3 meters, and I had to do that a couple times in the show. But I am not a high diver and never could, so I have huge respect for them, and have worked with so many amazing divers that have won Olympic medals.
Wow. Oh my God. So famous people out there have done it. So you obviously, dancing's a lot different than jumping off of a high dive and diving into a pool with the waves going back and forth. That probably would have been a tough transition again if you did that, but you stuck to dancing. Makes sense. So, when you mentioned you did a lot of traveling with as a dancer, and I'm thinking from the point of view, again, bringing it back to from my point of view, from tax and accounting, and maybe some of your friends that you still know in the industry, and my listeners, there's a lot of differences when it comes to being a dancer and what you can do from a tax perspective. And I thought I'd kind of go through a couple ideas, if that's okay.
Yeah, of course.
There's a rule with the IRS that every one of my clients tries to take advantage of, and it only applies to certain people. And that rule comes to uniforms, right? So uniforms have a very small window for definitions. What the definition of uniforms from the tax perspective is something you could wear while you're working that you wouldn't wear in the general public. So I talk about surgeons, garbage collectors, nurses. There's just ones that come to mind. But I can't imagine, I guess you could, but wearing like a dancing leotard or a tutu, I don't know the right words.
Yeah, there's a lot of things for our training, and even more specifically, costumes for stage and auditions, of course, that I would not wear once I leave the studio. So I'm definitely changing out of those.
Like you wouldn't go to Wegmans over there in Brooklyn with a dancing outfit on, I imagine.
No, I'd at least probably layer on top of it. Probably wouldn't be the most appropriate.
So when it comes to the rules for dancers with tax, there's a couple things they can do to help mitigate tax liability. And I know I've known you a while as a friend, so we've talked about these things. But for the benefit of my audience and people you might know as well, Stu, in the industry, I thought we'd talk about. One is switching if possible, this is a little more on the HR side, but switching your contract from an individual contract, in other words, Sammie Denham and Royal Caribbean directly, switching that over to, I'm just going to make it simple, Sammie Denham LLC and Royal Caribbean, if possible. And some cruise ships do, MSC might, Royal Caribbean may not, Carnival may, but you need to talk to the HR person there to say, can you contract me as a business entity, an LLC, rather than a person? And then the HR person will say, yeah, we can, or no, we can't. It's as simple as that. And the benefit there, going farther into that, is once you become an LLC, that's a state level moniker, which means you're protected for liability purposes for the business. But at the federal level, you then convert that LLC to an S corporation. Now you have a whole new tax situation happening where basically you're not taxed on self-employment income, which is 15.3% of self-employment taxes. It's a lot to add on to your taxes. It takes total revenue, which is your money earned dancing, minus all your expenses that you can do, such as your outfits and things like that. Whatever's left is your net income. And if you're not an LLC, an S Corp, you're paying self-employment tax on that net income at the tune of 15.3%. So when you're making, 100,000 a year or a couple 100,000 a year, that can add up a lot of money for tax liability purposes. So I always try to find a way to get that contract switched over if possible to a business, right? So that's number one. As far as whether you can be a business or not, the same expenses still pretty much apply. We talked earlier, you went to China, you were touring around in Canada, you then had your contract for 10 years with Royal Caribbean. With Royal Caribbean, it's different though, because when you go to Royal Caribbean, I assume they pay for all your expenses, such as meals and housing. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. So
As a performer.
as a performer, right. But to get to the ship, you have to fly there, right? Most of the time, I assume. And then if you live close, maybe you're leaving out of New York and you live in New York, you can take the train or a ferry or a Uber, Uber down to the Pier 49, wherever they leave from. If you're leaving from Florida, you got to fly to Florida. Flight time, the hotel to stay before you get on the cruise. And then the opposite end, getting off the cruise, the hotel when you get off the cruise, and then the transportation back home, all that would be a deduction as well, which is, it's a great expense you can take. As far as when you're in your off period, let me ask you, so you do what, used to do what, 6 months on, 2 months off, was it something like that?
Really depends on the contract. I've done 6-month contracts, 12-month contracts, and my time off in between's been anywhere from 2 weeks to 4 months.
Oh my goodness. Okay. When you're in your off period though, I think I know the answer, but are you still doing work as a dancer, whether you're training or communicating with Royal Caribbean or doing something to advance your career still as you're waiting?
Oh, yes, of course. My own training for one, auditions because you never know when the next job's going to come from. Teaching, do a lot of teaching as well, traveling around for that, and could be prep for the next job for Royal as well from home. So I'm always working on something.
You're always working on something. So I'm thinking the time if you have to go to a gym would be necessary. I assume you'd have to go to a gym to continue to train. Also, if you were going to a dance studio to keep up with your skills, if you had a 6 month or 1 year contract and you had four months to the next contract, you didn't dance for 4 months. I imagine that make you, we use rusty, but rusty, I guess is the right word.
Yes. Yeah, no. We always like to keep it up in between contracts. Just keep that muscle memory going with picking up choreography, executing it, keeping up our technique, all the things.
So you might actually go out and you might pay for training at times between that contract.
Oh, yeah. Yep. Every dancer pays for training in between jobs.
So I'm seeing things in between jobs because obviously when you're on the job at Royal Caribbean, a lot of it's covered for you. But in between jobs, expenses, would be your use of the gym, your clothing, again, specifically for dance related, your time with paying for dance lessons. Is that the right word? Lessons, I guess.
Lessons, training. Yeah.
Yeah, training. That's it. Sorry, dance training. All those things would be deductible as well. Now, if you do work out of the house, now that's where things get a little bit more specific. So the IRS says if you have a specific need to use your home, that means you have maybe a small studio in your second bedroom where you practice. You have to be on the email or phone with a, let's say you have a new gig, so to say, in between or with Royal Caribbean, or you use that as an office of some sorts to run, maybe you're doing lessons for other people and you're teaching, then it gets into another layer where you can take a portion of your home while you're off contract, in between contracts, I should say, as a deduction for your rent and utilities because you're using that as your base of operation in between contracts.
Yeah, absolutely. I do have mirrors in our second bedroom. I choreograph from home. I am often on pre-production calls for the next job on my computer. So in many ways, my home is also my office.
So that makes your not only your rent and your utilities, but that makes your cell phone costs partial, your internet costs partial, some office supplies if you need, like, I don't know, writing paper, pens, monitors, computers would be partial, deductible. You really got to look at the situation person by person. If someone just goes from contract to contract and they do nothing in between, they decide they're just gonna, they wouldn't do it, sit around eating bonbons or whatever and not do anything. That's a different story. But it sounds like dancers are more fastidious and they're actually training in between. And some even do teaching. And I think that's something for people to look out to in that industry is what is it you're doing between contracts, and then what level of that can be deductible for you. Also, if you have to do, like, okay, so when you're on your contract with Royal Caribbean and you're in your 6 month or 1 year contract, would you ever use your cell phone for business purposes while you're on that contract?
Oh, for sure, because I have other jobs lined up afterwards that I'm having to take calls for or be in communication for, or even just talking with team members who are maybe not on site at that time. My director or another associate I'm working with, we may come and go from the project at different times and have to stay in communication as we execute things with the cast on site.
Okay. So even when you're on contract, some of those expenses would spill over to allow to be deductible, which would be your cell phone cost. And again, we talked about the uniforms and things you wear, but even supplies or your computer. If you have to buy a computer when you're, I imagine you need a computer while you're there as well, on contract.
Oh, yeah, no, for sure. There's lots of documents that we have to work with, blocking books for staging that I have to create online. many various ways that I would also need my computer.
Right. So this is something where I'm kind of talking to you, but through you to people in the industry as well, because we've had a lot of these conversations in the past. But I think it's important for people to know, if you know anybody in that industry still, and anybody in my audience that knows someone in a similar situation, whether it doesn't have to be on a contract for a cruise, but even just at home, whether they're in dancing or some kind of performing arts, it doesn't just have to be I'm a contractor, I get a 1099, I can't deduct much. You have to be accurate. You have to speak to a CPA to find out what your situation is. But there are some ways you can take deductions outside the normal scope of just, I got to drive miles to and from someplace, whatever it is. There's some things you can work on. So it's something worth exploring if you know anybody in that industry to talk about that.
I'm planning to share this for one, because every tax season, all I see is dancers posting, anybody know an accountant that works with dancers or performers? Because most of us have no idea what we can and can write off. I know a lot at this point from working with you, and setting up an LLC has been a game changer. But when I was younger, not a clue. And I know so many performers asking all the time, what can I do? What can I write off? Who can I work with? There's that panic when it's tax season and they haven't done it yet. So in sharing this, for sure, I'm hoping it will answer some questions for people.
And to speak further into that, and I don't want to keep going on too long, but to speak further about that, I think it's important to know that people are from America, so U.S. based, and I know your situation is a little different, but just we're going to talk about this for a minute, is U.S. based contractors, employees who work in this situation. They have to remember that even if they're on a cruise ship or they're doing a contract on April 15th, which is the deadline, they still have to meet the filing requirements that go along with a U.S. citizen. So they can't just go, well, I'm on a cruise ship, I'm out of the country for 6 months. Well, there's still certain rules that you have to follow. You can get certain extensions of time based on your scenario, but I don't want them to go, yep, I'm gone, so I don't have to do anything.
Yeah, no, and I know for sure a few friends that have missed the deadline because you're not living in reality when you're on a ship and you forget timelines of things. So
No, it's good to work with a CPA because they look out for you. And, if you find one that's there all year round, they're there to remind you. And then, hey, I'm doing an extension for you. Don't worry about it. Keep doing your thing. We'll talk in August when you're off your contract, kind of thing.
yeah.
But if you set up, now this is unusual. I don't think it would happen, but if you set up, this is the last thing I'll talk about before I go on the next topic. But if you're a U.S. based, again, back to the U.S. based taxpayer, and you happen to, I don't know why you would, but set up a bank account in another country, could happen. Don't know if you would. There's also special reporting requirements that are very, very, very stringent. They have silly amount, like $25,000 penalty if you don't adhere to it. It's just informational. So let's say you go to Italy and you decide to stay there for 6 months between contracts. You start dancing over in Italy. I'm just making up a scenario. And they want you to open a bank account in Italy, but you're a US based taxpayer. If you don't report the fact you have an Italian bank account, it doesn't matter if there's $1 or 10,000. They don't even tax you on it. You have to report that to the federal government, or there is a penalty potentially up to 25,000 if you don't.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that. I'm glad I have you because I am unique in that I do have accounts in Canada. I'm a citizen there as well. And then I'm also a citizen of the UK. I don't have an account there yet, but if I ever spent a significant amount of time, I might be in that situation. So,
Ooh, I might have to talk to you how to become a citizen of the UK because I go over there quite a bit. I might need some assistance on that, getting that process done. But no, I just wanted to go through. I know it was a lot of time, but hopefully it helps some people kind of talking through you because we've had these conversations, but people you may know may not have before. So, and dancing is a way of life, but I think with you've transitioned in a way from dancing over to choreography, and that must have been a difficult transition when you switched from dancing to choreography.
you know what? It wasn't only because I've actually been consistently choreographing and performing since I was 18. I've been doing both. Obviously, in more recent years, fully switched over to choreography and direction. So that was a bit of a shift. I almost immediately went from performing on ships to being in charge of rehearsals. But because I've been doing it from a young age, it just came very naturally. It's something I also love. I love being on the creative side as much as I do on stage. And I've grown even more of a love for it in the last 7 years or so, getting to go from rehearsal choreographer to being on creations as part of the creative team as a assistant or associate choreographer or director, um, and getting to work with all the departments and seeing a show fully come to life from its concept to opening day, has brought me a lot of joy. And so I really enjoy being on this side.
Between like a choreographer for performers and a choreographer for the whole play itself? I mean, is there a difference, or is it all the same thing?
Yeah, well, I mean, the cast that I've gotten to work with consist of, they're aquatic shows, right? So they consist of dancers, synchronized swimmers, divers, slackline, aerialists, acrobats, um, you name it. So it's one thing to work with dancers because that's their wheelhouse. That's what they've done probably since they were 3, like me. But to work with these athletes, they are movers, but they come from a different world. So I have had to find ways to find that light bulb moment for them and explain choreography to them in a way that lends to their training for it to click. So that's been a challenge for me. Um, but it's almost even more satisfying when a non-dancer, as we call it, gets the movement because it means I've done my job even more. I've had to find ways to relay it to them because it's not just second nature for me to tell them a dance move and they know what that is. So yeah.
So you work with what, divers and swimmers as well? Is that the other people you'd work with that aren't dancers?
All of those disciplines that I mentioned all have to dance at some point in the show.
Wow. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, usually our opening number is all of those disciplines together. So about a cast of 30 on stage, and only maybe 6 of those are dancers.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, so to have them in unison.
Yeah. For you, that's just getting that part choreographed, but then you got to do the whole show itself. You have to choreograph the flow of things, I guess you'd call it. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. And because it's an aquatic venue, and so when I was a performer, I had to become scuba certified because we do a lot of entrances and exits underwater. The cast does as well. So I have to think about those transitions and choreograph those in terms of timing and who enters when, so there's no collisions underwater, and who has to be on air with our scuba. And then I have to work, with the synchronized swimmers. I don't pretend to know their language in their choreography, but there have been days where we workshop things together and I explain the look that I want and they know how that translates to their movement. But yeah, that was a whole new skill set in learning. Same with divers and their timing. They count very differently sometimes than I do. So figuring out whether they're a counts person or a musicality person, um, for entrances and exits. And then obviously we have a dive choreographer or coach that works with them on the dives because I am not trained in that. But same thing with our aerialists. We have a aerial choreographer, but they make their routines, but in terms of transitions or sometimes just extra flair on their movement, around their technique, I've had to work with them as well. And they will do entrances underwater too. So yeah, I've had to learn all different skills in terms of putting a show together.
Because when you go to watch a show, you're like, yeah, it's a half-hour show, whatever it may be, and you're like, that looked easy. And I'm not saying it is. I'm just saying from an outside perspective, it looks easy. But I think that's what you want to go for because the easier it looks to us, the audience, the more smooth it is, and probably the harder it was for you to get there. Maybe.
Oh, for sure. That is the goal at the end of the day. We want people to be at ease in their seats and entertained, not clenching like, oh, is that going to work? And we work with amazing professionals that have the ability to pull that off. I mean, a lot of our synchronized swimmers and divers are Olympic medalists. So, uh, yeah, the skills and the quality of the talent that we have and work with is, it's what everyone dreams of when putting a show together. But it takes a lot of work to get there and a lot of coordination, and many numbers will have aerial and diving and synchro and dance all happening at the same time. So you have to make sure that that's safe as well.
Oh no, you're right. Well, that's just it. Is if it wasn't smooth from the choreography standpoint, I would be in the audience going, "Oh my gosh, I can't even watch this," because you're expecting some kind of like collision. But when you're watching, like, oh, that looks totally natural. Not, I didn't mean easier. I meant smoother. It's just so smooth. You're like in the moment. You're like, this is beautiful. It's graceful. Everything looks just right. You don't get scared. You're in awe and wonder, and you're in the moment, as opposed to going, oh, I don't want to watch because I think the diver is going to hit the person over there. And it's not like any kind of thing like that because it's so intricate and so well put together.
That's the goal.
Is a lot of work. So choreography is looking at everybody, where a dancer is just worried about just one thing. You're worried about the dance side of things. You're not concerned about the diver or the other people. Aerial, I always say it wrong.
Yeah, Ariel. Yeah. Yeah, no, that's probably the biggest transition from being a performer to being on the creative side is when you're a performer, I mean, you have to be aware of everybody, but you're more focused on yourself and your execution of the show. As a creative, not just choreography, but direction, even more than that, you have to look at all the puzzle pieces. And, that's just the creation of it and the choreography. And then there's lighting, there's sound, there's a wardrobe, there's set pieces, there's the traffic backstage and, their choreography throughout a show with your stage staff and your production manager calling the show, and your head rigger looking out for the aerialist. So there's a lot going on behind the scenes that's choreography in itself as well.
I never thought of, because behind the scenes, I'm like, oh, that person just disappeared. They must have gone to some other magic world. I don't even know where they are now. But there's the whole traffic system behind the curtains.
Yeah, we have what we call tracks backstage, so everyone's got a track of what they're doing, and that can make or break a show flow more than anything. Because if people don't make it on stage, well, then you as an audience member notice that something's gone wrong.
Yeah, there were 5 dancers. Why is there only two now? Two bumped into each other backstage and knocked themselves out or something because they're running the wrong direction.
Yeah, and that can happen in a panic backstage. So
Well, imagine you're trying to do wardrobe change, you forget what track you're supposed to be on, and all of a sudden you're like, oh my god, I just hit somebody else or I banged into a wall or something like that. I don't know what it would be, but I just never thought about the choreography behind scenes. So I guess as a choreographer, you'd have to be concerned, and a dancer, you'd have to be concerned about behind the scenes as well.
absolutely. We always laugh because every first dress rehearsal where we incorporate costumes, probably 50% of people don't make it on stage because it's this whole added quick change on top of this brand new show they've just learned. And so that's, as us as creatives, we know it's going to happen. We're not worried about it. We'll do more runs, but the first one's always a little bit funny for us. It's like almost placing bets on how many people are going to make it.
Is it Mike? Is it going to be Michelle? Who's going to miss this one? Put the over under on somebody. Wow. So you've transitioned into choreography. You've done cruise ships. You've done dancing. You've really seen so many different facets of the performing arts. And you're now doing a new role. But before we get in kind of the nitty gritty about how people get a hold of you, do you see any trends or anything that has come up lately that's different than what you've done in the past? Maybe even related to AI or tech or anything new?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, TikTok is a huge one in recent years. A lot of dancers have hopped on board. I myself am not on it. I just chose to not have another social platform that I have to focus on. But a lot of dancers have made a ton of money from being on TikTok and having these platforms and sponsors and followers. So that's a new trend for sure. And AI is popping up in our world as well. I know a lot of people don't like it. I feel kind of two ways about it. I think it's best to not be scared of it, but find a way to use it in our world. Find, the new skill sets that we can gain from it. I mean, this week alone, I have had to make a pitch deck for a performance, and using AI to create the renders of what I want the stage to look like made it so much easier. Whereas in the past I would have had to draw that or clip art, and so there are a lot of great ways that AI could play into our industry, and we can utilize them to make our work faster, more efficient. But that being said, I don't think it could ever fully replace a human in terms of what we do, because we have our own personal, history of experiences and knowledge and emotions that are unique to us, that when we create movement, there's no way a computer could create that exact movement that comes from our brains. Especially if we get into a room with another artist and collaborate, or many artists, what we could come up with collectively. I personally just don't think AI will ever replicate that kind of unique creation.
I just couldn't see the Google robot coming out there and trying to like to dance like it'd be like, oh my god, that's like what the heck is going on out there? This looks horrible. A Google robot or something from Elon Musk robot or something.
Yeah. I mean, it's pretty impressive what you can create with it, even in terms of movement. I've seen some beautiful videos. And so I think there's a place for it, and maybe even a place for it where you incorporate live as well as the AI. Um, but I don't think it could ever replace what we can create. It might replace certain skill sets within the industry. But I think if, we choose to learn it and work with it instead of be afraid of it and avoid it, we can grow with it and just add to our own skill sets and application.
Yeah, you had mentioned earlier you worked with what's the ones that work in the water and they choreograph in the water with their feet and all that kind of stuff. You said there's the
Synchronized swimmers.
synchronized swimmers, you have aerialists, you have divers. Maybe there's a place way in the future, be like an AI type of situation where you could either have like a spotlight in there or but I couldn't see the whole production being based on that because, like you said, dancing and performing arts is so personal and so personable. You could never replace it with something so rigid, even if they're just as good. You need that expression from a human being and have their personality come through.
Absolutely. And I think what people love about live performance is it's going to be a little different every time because it's a human executing it. If everything became computerized and I personally think we get a little bored of it because it would, you'd know what to expect. Um, that's the beauty of live performance, is you don't know what to expect, and it will be different every time. Just simply because of, I don't want to call it human error. It's not human error, but just human execution changes just a tiny bit every time.
What makes it fun and exciting. You could even watch a show twice. Oh, I haven't seen that show in 5 years on Broadway. I can go see it again because it might be a little bit different than you saw it 5 years ago.
It absolutely would be, because it's probably a whole new cast at that point, and everybody executes a role differently. So that's also the cool thing. Like, how I interpret something is going to be completely different to how someone else interprets it. So you're getting two completely different shows by going more than once, if that role has switched out. Or even just me as a person, I grow over the span of 6 months. How I executed it 6 months ago is different to today. So that is something with AI that would get boring over time, I think, because you wouldn't have people returning to the theater because they've already seen it and it will be exactly the same. But yeah, there wouldn't be that little element of suspense knowing anything could happen if it was all made by a computer.
Exactly. Oh, wait, was somebody going to flub a line or miss a cue? And sometimes it's funny when that happens. And I'm sure the performers feel horrible, but the audience, like, you know what? I appreciate that because that makes you human. It's fun.
But, in our own workflow, I think there's great ways of using AI. I was speaking to my husband about it yesterday, and he had a fantastic idea. Like, what if before I get into a studio with dancers, I put my own movement on AI and put it on several and have them move in blocking, and I can see my idea come to life, and whether it works or not before I get into a studio with bodies, and save myself time and be able to work faster and more efficiently by the time I'm in that studio paying dancers and paying studio rentals. So I think there's a lot of ways it could help us in our prep, and then as well as in our visual, presentations in terms of pitch decks or pre-pro.
Wow, that's a really good idea. Yeah, your husband has a lot of good ideas when it comes to tech and stuff. That seems to be his game, his area of expertise.
A great person for me to bounce ideas off of when it comes to tech, because I'm always behind. So,
I talk to him all the time about that. It sounds like a tax deduction too. I hear tax deduction if there's a software in there too. You know me, I gotta find a hook there somewhere for taxes.
yep. No, there absolutely is. I mean, I use Canva all the time for projects. That right there, that's a deduction for that membership. So,
Software as a service. You gotta get that deduction wherever you can. And I always look at it from a point of view of taxes, and of course, you look at it from the point of view of tech when it comes to performance art. And there's a place for everything with AI and technology. That's great. So I've learned a lot about you as the dancer, as a choreographer, but let's talk about you, Sammie, as a person. Basically, like kind of from, I'm not saying from birth, but all the way back to basically just before you started working on, Royal Caribbean. Tell us more about you, your family life, you have family and where you're from and all that kind of stuff.
So I'm from a small, it's technically not an island, it's a peninsula. It's a land between two waters, but you can only get there by ferry. So we think of it as an island. It's a 45-minute ferry ride from Vancouver. It's called the Sunshine Coast. And I grew up there, and it's beautiful. And I'm so grateful to have grown up surrounded by nature and ocean and that small town vibe.
Yeah, is that near Seattle? I'm trying to think. Do I have it right? Is that near Seattle? Like a couple hours from Seattle, or am I in the wrong spot?
Yeah, so Vancouver's about 3 hours north of Seattle.
Okay, I know that area. I know of the area then as well. Isn't there a train that goes up all the way through like the Antarctic or something like that to Alaska through Vancouver? Or am I thinking of something else?
Yep, yep. There's some trains that go north and across Canada that start in Vancouver. We're kind of the beginning hub. We're near Whistler, so you've got all your snowboarding, which I also got to do growing up on one of the best mountains in the world. So I realized how fortunate I am now. Growing up, it was just a given. We're going to Whistler for sure. Yeah. So yeah, yeah. And I started dancing at 3. I did figure skating, gymnastics, played a lot of sports. Was into a lot of different things that, you know, funny enough, later in life, I think lended itself to me understanding working with these different athletes.
What other sports did you do? You said you did figure skating and obviously dancing. Was there other sports you did? Like were they group sports, individual sports?
Yeah, I played soccer, basketball, baseball, track and field. I was kind of that kid that liked to do everything and didn't have enough time for it all. So eventually dance took over, and by high school I was only dancing.
It's funny though because I played tennis growing up, and my two kids play team sports. One plays football, one plays soccer, and I'm always like, you need to score that touchdown. You need to score the soccer goal. She's like, it's a team. My daughter will be like, it's a team. I'm like, no. I go, think like a tennis player. It's just you on the field. She's like, Dad, you don't get group sports. I go, it's about the team. I'm like, I know, but get out there and score a goal. So coming from an individual tennis or a sport industry, I'm like, my daughter or my kids and I sometimes have this correlation that it doesn't overlap all the time because I think like a singular entity sport.
Yeah, as an individual.
Yeah, it's individual. If you mess up, the team didn't mess up. You messed up. You lost the game. She's like, no, Dad, it's a team sport. So I kind of get trying out different sports. That's funny.
I never would have even thought of that. I mean, dancing since I was 3, I had to learn how to be part of an ensemble.
Really? Also, dancers aren't individual mindsets. They're group mindset. Then is it?
I mean, eventually you are both because you will be a soloist at some point, but from a young age, the very first thing you learn is how to be part of an ensemble and fit in and not stand out.
Okay, I thought it'd be the opposite. That's it. I always, for some reason, I thought you were going to say dancers think individualistically, but you're actually now that you say it, of course, you have to choreograph with other people, play nice in the sandbox.
Yeah, you have to be so self-aware because you're changing formations all the time. Can't run into people on stage. Those are those moments we're talking about that people get to laugh at when it happens sometimes.
You bump into somebody else, like, oh, it's you feel bad as a performer. The audience actually appreciates because it makes you human in a way. They actually appreciate it more. Now, did you have other family with you
I have a older brother. He's 6 years older, and then my parents. My brother was always into very different things than me, although he is a musician, and so is my father. So we have a lot of music in our household.
Oh, wow. What kind of music did they do or do they do?
My dad's a bass guitar, and my brother plays drums, and they've been in bands my whole life.
Funny. Oh my God. My wife thinks the bass guitar is the most important part of a band. And I am convinced that the drummer is the most important. We literally go see a band, there's a drummer and a bass, and go, oh, that drummer's driving the beat. She's like, Absolutely not. The bassist is there adding the groove. I said, no, it's the drummer. We always have like a conflict about bassist and drummers. That is so funny, the two.
That's hilarious. Yeah, they've been in bands my whole life, and they've dragged me up to sing a couple times. Yeah. So we've had fun as a family that way. But funny enough, I've tried to play drums with Rock Band, and I can't do it to save my life. I'm so bad at it. Although on recent shows that I've created, we've had taiko drumming, and I've had to learn it, and I've gotten quite good now. But I used to be hopeless with drumming, which was hilarious growing up because my brother was so good at it.
Well, you got to have a metronome for. I don't know if this is the right word. Would you use a metronome for dancing? Metronome's used for drumming. Would that apply to dancing as well, or not really? Timing.
I mean, we've had to learn music theory growing up, and all the different rhythms. So we learn that while we're dancing, we don't use it. We just count the music.
There's no like you would with a drummer or something to keep up with that, but it's the rhythm of the beat that you keep up with rather than the metronome. What kind of band was your dad in?
And he still plays in a band, mostly, just for fun. They jam, once a month, do the odd gig, at the hall or whatever for New Year's Eve, things like that. But it's like a rock band. Um,
That's so cool. I mean, when I went to school, I remember I went to school at Niagara University, which is on the border of Canada, Niagara Falls, complete opposite end of the your country from you're from. The music stations in Canada had to play apparently had to play a certain percentage of Canadian artists on their channel. So it wasn't just like America, you can play anybody you want. In Canada, it had to have like 30% or 25% Canadian artists. And I'd listen to like I knew all the different bands. I can't think of them, but I learned so many Canadian artists because the radio station would come right over to our side of the country, right across the border. And I appreciated the music so much over there. And I go over to the UK, which I do a lot, and a lot of those bands play over here. Not playing, but they're familiar with those bands as well. But a lot of people in America, farther south, they like, yeah, I don't know these bands. I'm like, yeah, they're a great band because I listened to them growing up, and I guess that's the way they do it. You have to have a certain percentage of artists. It's kind of cool.
oh, that's interesting. I mean, that's great. I didn't know that. I just listened to them, not knowing, but that makes sense now because I've mentioned the odd artist to my husband and he's had no idea who they were. Like it just wouldn't have crossed paths in his world growing up. So,
And I'd be like, yeah, I know them. Of course I know them. You're like, how do you know them? So you're okay. So your dad is in a band or still does it. It bases. What kind of band is your brother in, or was it? What is in?
same thing, rock bands, sometimes punk bands when he was younger as well. Um, yeah, he's a full-time marketing analyst for EA Sports in Vancouver.
Oh my God, that's great.
So yeah, the whole music thing is more of a hobby these days. But yeah,
That's great. EA Sports, I think, is based where I'm from in Orlando, but I could be wrong. I think it's
their headquarters are in Vancouver.
okay, because I think at one point there was a big location in Orlando for EA Sports.
Yeah, they do have locations around the world actually, but their headquarters are in Vancouver.
Wow, that's great. Yeah, there's a lot of tech on the west coast of America and Canada, like Microsoft and all those kind of things. So it makes sense up in Vancouver to have EA Sports with technology and stuff. Makes sense.
My mom actually owns a company based out of Vancouver that creates sensors for things like Microsoft or anything like keyboards or the sensors around tennis courts for the U.S. Open.
Hey,
Yeah, yeah. That actually, I got to see the U.S. Open in New York when I was 16 because her company was coming down here to meet and talk about the sensors for it. So,
wow. There's a new thing now with the US Open where they have that slow motion camera to show you if the ball's in or out. You've ever seen that on the US Open? It like the ball, everyone's like starts cheering and it bounces like, way, they like cheer to it or something.
yeah, I actually love tennis. I went to the U.S. Open this year.
Absolutely love tennis.
Yeah, my mom, my brother, and me we love tennis.
Oh my God. Next time you go, you let me know. We'll have to all go together. Get the whole, my wife and Kevin and you guys all going together. That'd be fun.
Yeah, I would love that.
Yeah, so your mom still works in tech. My gosh, it is very tech heavy, but also musically inclined. family. What an interesting, dichotomy between the two with obviously performance art and then technology. You wouldn't think they go hand in hand.
Yeah. Yeah, I've had both in my household. It's very interesting. And my mom, personally is the CPA, the accountant for the company.
Wow. Okay.
So I was very lucky when I turned 18. I had my mom to help me with taxes. And then obviously moving to the US added a whole other complication, and I started working with you. But I am fortunate. I've always had people in my corner for that, but I know a lot of performers do not. So,
Well, I feel privileged you actually spoke to me, knowing that your mom's an accountant. I feel very privileged that you came to me because that means a lot. You came from a family that had a good history with accounting, so it makes you feel even better. That's great. Yeah, so you've had a lot of experience in arts and music and technology in the family. And then now you've transitioned in your own business. Do you want to tell people more about your business, how they can get a hold of you, what you do, and then people can get a hold of you at some point? Yeah.
yeah, so I have my own choreography and creative direction company. It's called Denham Direction, which you can find at denhamdirection.com for any of those services. I also have a full scale production company with two friends and colleagues, Shay Kubler and Felix Hurt. It's called creativepackproductions.com. So we can do anything from solo artists to full scale shows, and we have many people that can work for us in terms of lighting and sound and choreography of various types. And then I also do photography. So denhamphotos.com, a variety of different types of photography, but I mostly, of course, love working with dancers or movers. So a lot of movement and portrait photography.
Well, can you buy the actual portraits online on your website?
You know what? It's something I'm working on. So hopefully that is coming soon. I'd love to set up a store. Right now, it's just a portfolio of my work, and you can get in touch to book photo shoots. But I am working on the store as well.
Will you travel to people, and what's your distance from where you are to how far you'll travel to people?
I'm open to traveling anywhere. Obviously, just depends what we can work out. I've done a lot of photography in Vancouver as well as in New York, obviously, because those are kind of my two bases. But I would travel anywhere if it worked out.
Okay, great. And then can they get a hold of you through the website or through email, either way, or phone number or anything like that? Or is there other ways to get a hold of you?
Everything is on the website. You can find my contact there, and contact forms as well. So yeah, again, that's denhamphotos.com, denhamdirection.com, and creativepackproductions.com.
Okay. And are they all singular production? There's no S's on the ends of those and the end of those words, right? It's just production.com or productions
Productions.
with an S. Okay. So I'm being specific because I want to make sure that people can get a hold of it. I don't want to be missing out on it. That's great. So you have a lot of areas of expertise that people can work with you in and have an opportunity to help other people out. And you said you travel, it can be other countries. So you have a really big audience that can work with you. That's exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. Personally, I have citizenship in Canada, and the UK, and I'm a green card holder here. So I can definitely work in those three countries, but pretty easy to work anywhere. It's fine. Yeah.
Well, that's good. I'm back and forth to the UK quite a bit. My wife's Welsh, so if I know of anybody needing those services, that might be something I can use to promote you as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's great. Okay, well, I really, really appreciate you taking the time today. And people have been I'm sure people will be really excited knowing more about you. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
All right. That brings us to an end of another episode. I'll see you on the next episode. Have a good day.
Behind Closed Books podcast requires more than a conversation. It takes action, research, and collective wisdom. If today's episode resonated with you, we'd love to hear your insights. Join the conversation and help us shape the future together. We'll be back with more stories, strategies, and real-world solutions that are making a difference for everyone. In the meantime, be sure to subscribe, rate, write a review, and share it with someone you think would benefit from it too. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode.